Welcome to What's Your Marketing Message? My name is Dr. Russ Flayton. Dr. Jessica Garza couldn't make it on today, but I know she sends her best. Very quickly, I'll get rid of the boring stuff and we can dive right in. We've both been consulting for over a decade in a variety of settings, military, sports, and Jessica's now a CEO of her own company, Altier LLC. And the one thing we really wanted to get across today is this idea of process. When we think about a traditional elevator pitch, it tends to be one note. We think a lot about how can we get people bought into mental skills and what that looks like. And that's a good conversation, it really is. Understanding the industry and positioning the industry is one thing. But today what we wanted to do is for you as a consultant, whether you're within an organization or you're consulting independently, what are just the considerations? What's the process to develop deeper credibility, strengthen relationships, to help position yourself for more long-term success as you get into your career? And for those of you who are already been consulting for a while, hopefully you'll just be able to pick up some things to help refine your process that you've already got in place. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So what you'll walk away with today, let's go ahead and get right into it. It's a process for how to identify and message to your ideal client. And that really involves a couple things. How we research the market, going beyond what we learn in school, the academic journals. What are the things we need to know about the market so we're walking in as prepared as possible? And also that allows us to better identify who really is our ideal client beyond just knowing I want to work with an athlete. There's more to it than that. So how can we help funnel that down to make it simpler? And the second thing, though, is the ability to leverage our philosophy and story, especially for positioning ourselves in the marketplace. Our field is great at promoting the field of sports psychology. But if we just kind of take a step back and look around at all the social media, all the marketing, all the messaging, it's all one note. You know, mental skills are important. Here's why. Mental health is important. Here's why. And that's great. But think about you. How are you going to separate yourself from your peers if you're trying to establish your own consulting? And that's where reflecting on our own philosophy and our story can be a way to build those connections and allow us to have our own unique value when we go out and do our work. So those are the things you're going to walk away with today, is the process to identify your ideal client and have confidence in the message you're trying to convey. So getting right into it, understanding your brand. There's two questions I want you to reflect on right away before we do anything else. What is your why? We've probably heard this a lot from Simon Sinek. But what is your why? What are you really about? And part two, what is your story? And if you want to pause this, feel free as we go through, but starting with reflecting on our why can help us drill down a little bit to what is our story? What are the events that led me to have my philosophy that I have about my approach to my work? What does that story look like? And the reason this is so important is because your brand is personal. That's what's unique to you. That's your unique value. And that's going to resonate with certain people, while other people's stories might resonate with others. So keep that in mind, because the story is that vessel that can help us start to separate out from the field and allow us to better position our approach, our process to clients. And so I wanted to share two brand stories. Neither one of them are that inspiring per se. So I think this is interesting as you look at it, have your own reflection. But the point of the story is that it's personal to them, it's their journey. So the first one is from a company called Made For. Some of you may have heard of them, some of you may have not. But Made For, just briefly as a company, for those who haven't, they're taking a quote unquote analog approach, developing habits for the long game. That's their buzzwords, their statements. But they have a story about what they're about. So I'll just read it as you go through. But co-founders Blake McCoskey and Patrick Doucette are passionate about family, teamwork, adventure, and the proven science behind human potential. And together they founded Made For. And as many similarities as they share, they come from different worlds. So this is that first paragraph's a little bit of a mission, if you will, the science behind human potential. But now they get into each one of their backgrounds. I won't read it all, but you can see it in there. I'm just going to slowly scroll. But Blake, the former founder of Tom's, what he's about. And then Pat, being a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, and his background. So I'll just slowly scroll through as you look at this. But one of the sentences toward the bottom is Pat believes in the power of small steps and is passionate about helping others realize their full potential. Now, when it comes to this story, we don't know what influenced their philosophies. This is a little bit of a quick, it's more of kind of a biography approach to a story, but it is a story. And that can resonate with some people. So it's not about right or wrong. It's just being authentic to you and what would you want to portray as you're going out. Now, this is obviously housed on a website. But the reason I also want to pull this up is when you're going out delivering your pitch, your story is going to come through. Why is your approach to doing this so important? And when you can articulate some of that story and those influences, it resonates with people a little bit more on an emotional level. And not to digress too much, but people don't necessarily buy with logic, buy with emotion. So it's just some things to keep in mind. So we'll exit this one. Now I want to get to Headspace. This is one of the most popular referral tools we have that psychologists and counselors use for clients when they're not there. But this is cool because it's a little bit about Andy and what he's about. And if you don't know who Andy is, he's the one who does all the mindfulness meditations on there. But this is a little bit more of a story and about his journey. So I won't read it. I'll just slowly scroll through so you can see it. So what's interesting here is that this is a little bit more of what caused Andy to get to this place. Excuse me. Talk about his early influences. For 10 years, taking training in Nepal, India, Burma. He returned to the UK with initial goal. Right? Teach meditation to as many people as possible, demystify it, make it simple, easy to use. Then he also met another person, helping them deal with stress in the advertising world. That formed Headspace, right? That can resonate with people. That's just another example of a story, very different from what Made For put out there. But once again, it's the story underneath the elevator pitch. And that's something that I'm going to continue to come back to this as your value, because it's personal to you. So let's take a moment now that we also went back through at the beginning. I had you reflect on what's your why, what's your story. Just take notes on this. You don't have to have an answer to it today, but here's the first exercise. Now that I went through a couple examples. What is your why and what are you about? And what is your story? Just start kind of taking notes on what that looks like. And I'll pause here for a second before we continue. But the brand piece is really important. that's true to you, it's authentic, it's what's going to separate you right now. So as we kind of summarize the brand piece here, and the reason I keep saying it's personal, it's unique to you. I say this because it's important for all of us to know we get into this field because it's exciting, it's fun. But especially when you first get out in the field, most of the education degrees that we have at the master's and doctoral level are very similar. There's not a lot of differentiation. So our expertise from a science perspective really isn't very different. And the field blanketly promotes sports psychology or mental skills. We're really good at advocating why this is important. But how are we advocating why you're important? That's different. So once again, the brand's personal to you. And for right now, especially early in your career, your personal philosophy and your story, that may be your only differentiation right now until you get a little bit more experience, and maybe you then create different types of products or creative services that can further differentiate you from your peers. But this is a great place to start, especially when you're thinking about what you learned in school. And now as you're getting forward, that's going to be your passion and your driver, and it's going to resonate with people as well, which is also even more important for non-licensed folks, because with the licensure, your value add is very clear. I can address mental health. For those of us who don't have it, that mandatory need in the community, you're going to have to generate on your own. Now, brand in your personal story is one thing. Part two here is understanding the market. So the same way we study research and science in school, we want to be researching the community that we want to work with. And there's a few considerations to keep in mind. First, marketing is communication. That's all it is. And so if I want to effectively communicate, I need to make sure I'm doing the best job I can of understanding my audience. So then what do we need to know? So that way we can help make sure we're keeping our assumptions in check. Not every assumption is a bad thing. We can trust our gut a lot, but there are other things we want to make sure we're considering. So that way we're not just operating off of gut instinct when we're branding ourselves, promoting different services, or selling different things to leadership teams. Let's make sure that we're doing our homework, doing our homework externally. So branding is personal and very internal. Marketing is very, it's a combination of internal, but it's heavily external because we're doing so much research on what's out there in our audiences. So the first place to start is, where do we do our research? What are common sources? First is, if we think about groups we want to work with, I'll go ahead and just say college athletics. That's a very common population. Well, who would be those stakeholders? What would I need to know about a college athletic department that I might want to reach out to and do some work for? So athletes are clearly going to be impacted by that. Athletic directors would be impacted by that. Coaches, alumni, donors, they're all going to be impacted by that. But then we can couple that with a couple other areas. What's happening locally in the community or nationally? Just think about the biggest change this year with athlete likeness and college athletes being able to sign those contracts. You bet that impacts what we're doing. There's been opportunities already for partnering with marketing firms or agents, or even coming in and providing training now. Think about how we teach confidence, for example, just throwing that out there. But what about confidence with social media now? Because it's all about branding and likeness. So it's taken even another turn versus where it was a couple of years ago with just dealing with social media. The last piece, what industries may impact our services? And there are a couple things in mind. Two, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Education. Think about it. campuses shut down, that impacted us and impacted what services we might be able to provide, as well as technology. As technology grows and gets better, that also has influences. So getting into a little bit more detail here, when we look at different organizations and stakeholders, once again, organizationally, who's going to be impacted? The leadership team, coaches, athletes, parents, those booster groups. What's happening in the community? So what's going on locally around this organization? So the actual physical location is a big impact. Anything nationally worth noting, just gave that example. So looking at local and national news outlets. And I already mentioned the education and technology. So once again, why does this matter when we're looking at marketing ourselves or trying to get credibility? Because one, we need to keep our we need to keep our assumptions in check. And one fun thing about business is being able to test our hypothesis. That's part that actually relates kind of like school. But am I coming in to test a product that I've been really excited to test, or a mental skills program and really excited to get out, and I didn't do my homework? Well, I may not even know what I'm really trying to test then. Right? It's just another consideration. So market research helps us avoid only relying on instinct when we're going out and doing work, so we continue to learn. So that way, when I'm coming in, what I am testing is vetted already, which establishes a credibility. But the second part to this, we can speak at a more at the level of a leadership team. And here's what I mean by that. School is very athlete focused. We learn theory, application, and how we can apply that to the athlete. So we get a lot of repetitions looking at an athlete's perspective. That can resonate with some leaders, but leaders have a lot more things on their plate. They have alumni to deal with. They have budgeting concerns to deal with. Yes, player development is one, but they have more moving parts. So if we're doing the market research, we can kind of position ourselves a little bit more within context of what they're dealing with. So that's immediate to them, and they can start seeing that connection. So that's just something to keep in mind, is it allows us to talk at their level, even if at the end of the day, all we're doing is still going to go in and provide mental skills. That doesn't matter, but it changes the dialogue. So here's exercise number 2, and this is a chance to kind of put some of these concepts into play. To be very clear, I'm not looking for a right or wrong answer, and because this is virtual, I can't even check. But certainly when we're done, feel free to reach out to myself or Jess, and we're happy to sit down and answer questions. But let's walk through one. So you'll have a couple handouts. You'll have one handout that has multiple media articles in there. So local and national considerations, as well as a research study that was published through the University of North Texas on student athletes' experiences during COVID. What I would like you to do for this exercise is practice developing your proposal. Like, what would you actually want to convey to a leader? But use the materials first, just read through them and just jot down some initial things. From a leader's perspective, what do you think would be important for them? What would they want to solve? Because what this does, it might change, once again, the context for us pitching our services, that elevator pitch, if you will. So as you go through this, jot down what the concerns are. What are you seeing that are major pain points that might be weighing on a leader's mind? And then create your message. And when it comes to creating your message, be very creative. If you want to take this from the standpoint of, I might send an email, or I take it from the perspective that I'm going to actually have a meeting. Either one, doesn't matter. But what would be the message? So what do you think you could help them with? What would you want to say, and what could that look like? So take as much time as you want. Come back to the recording when you're done. Okay. So as we reflect on this to this point, this exercise was intended to help you just get a better idea of what the process would look like when you're trying to research your market or your ideal client. So if you know you want to work with a D3 institution or a D1 institution, great. That's very specific. So what would go into doing that type of research? And this was the start of it, because the next exercise will help even funnel it in even more. But just the idea of knowing research articles is great. Knowing the science and how that helps is great. But holding ourselves accountable, right, to those assumptions I alluded to, having a process of what needs to be researched can help you better identify pain points that are going to be on the leader's radar. So that way, when you reach out, you're demonstrating that you clearly understand them. No doubt, okay, you've done your homework and how you can position your services. So let's put it all together. So in part one, we talked about our brand, our philosophy, and our process for research. So let's kind of put it together into a fluid process here for what it could look like when you're going out into the field. So you have your brand and your philosophy, your story, what all that's about. Continue to reflect on that, because then you get to be known for something. So that's part one. Think about Michael Gervais. He's got a very clear brand as well. I should have talked about him earlier, so I apologize for jumping around. That resonates with people. But now when it comes to finding the people you want to work with, let's kind of put what we did in exercise 2 into a little bit more concise way of looking at it. So identifying the ideal customer can help us go from I like working with athletes to being really clear on what type of athlete, who is my ideal athlete. Especially if you're saying I want to work with high school athletes or college athletes, that might be your end audience, the end user, but you got to get through the coach first, right? Or you might need to get through that community soccer program first. So if you just say, I want youth athletes or college athletes, that's great, start there. But then let's look at who you got to get through to get there. And the ideal customer profile can really help you funnel that down. So this comes from a traditional business term for helping you organize your research into a clear, concise profile. What do I need to know about this person before I reach out? That's all it is. So here's 3 concepts just to start with. Who are they? What's their title? What's their role? What do they do? Just think about those things, because then you can look that up on LinkedIn. You can find out about their history, their background. It's just, who are they? Then why do they exist? So when you think about the team or the department or the school, what's their mission? What's their vision? What's their strategic plan? Because that'll highlight exactly what all their interests are, what their priorities are. Why do they exist? And then where do they operate? Because this will help you with some of that local stuff, logistically, where they're at. But then if there's any type of community factors that might be impacting that, right? So who are they? Why do they exist? And where do they operate? And so with those questions, I already kind of described it here, but it gives us a foundation for the logistics and in local impacts, as well as their values and mission, and just a better understanding of what they do, their role with the individual people within it, which then can help us craft those pain points. What are we seeing? So that way, and this is probably a silly analogy, but I think it's the most accurate. It's just like preparing for a job interview. You're trying to assess fit on both ways, and the better you understand that organization, you can answer questions on the fly. It's still, you still have to educate, right, on the elevator pitch in terms of what your value is, but it's easier to position yourself. when you've done that. So then also, with the social media considerations, you can see what they're following on social media. And then also with your brand and what you are about, this is that last piece. You're going to want to do a certain type of work. And you might find out really quickly that this isn't going to be a good fit based on what you research. So as much as we focus on going out and getting work, it's also equally important for ourselves because fit goes both ways. And saying all that, the social media considerations, who's on what? Social media considerations probably be its own thing, but I will get specific here for a second. When it comes to your branding and raising awareness, who's on what and what are the purposes? So Instagram, I know, is very popular. If you're a business or you're a consultant, though, it's not. It's already starting to get regulated. Yes, you can get an audience on there, and that's great. But you're going to have to start paying very soon. The free use, those kind of things. So if you have money, Instagram's great. A challenge, though, is think about some of the ads you're getting. They may not even be targeted related to what you're doing. So you got to be careful, because if you put some of that marketing ads on Instagram, it may not even go to the right audience. But TikTok and LinkedIn are really, really strong spots. So Instagram or TikTok is great for Gen Z. So you can start raising an audience there. But that also you have to keep that in mind. I might be raising an audience with athletes. But if I'm trying to secure contracts, I'm going to have to get to coaches and parents kind of thing. So where are they? They're going to be more on LinkedIn or Facebook. Facebook costs as well. So these are things to keep in mind when we're talking about branding. I know that's very brief. We can talk more about it. But once again, the components of the ICP, just so I can kind of bring this all together for everybody, the components of the ICB help you thoroughly understand your audience. From there, you can look at what their pain points are and what you want to say. And then where do you want to say it? So if I'm sending an email, that's one thing. If I'm trying to set up a meeting, that's one thing. If I want to reach them via social media, if I have a clear understanding of their demographic, who they are, it can also help me decide which vessel, which social media platform I might want to use. Okay. So as we wrap this all up for today, when we're talking about elevating our elevator pitch and being a little bit more systematic at finding our ideal group, just start with your why and your story. It's got to come from us first in terms of being authentic to ourselves, because it resonates. If you're chasing a buck, you're going to have a tough go. You'll make money early, but you'll burn out quick. It's just the reality. So just think about what got you into this, what inspires you, and what's your story. What's influenced your approach. Start there, because that'll help you with your own brand. But then develop sound practices for researching the market, because what that'll help you do is start crafting what you want to say to get their attention. And then in terms of clearly identifying your target audience, the ICP framework is really the start of the how-to. Use that framework to help organize what you're researching in the market. And so combining your brand with your story and how you research the market, that'll really help you elevate your pitch to demonstrate credibility and get buy-in as you go forward. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Jess or I. Thank you for your time.